The Seahawks, Mike Macdonald, is a former Raven, have not brought one Raven in. And I said to Salk in our little Blue 88 segment last hour, I'd be shocked if we don't see a Wolverine or two that's drafted or brought in here because of Jay Harbaugh, because of all the familiarity, because this staff knows their guys inside and out. Who would be a few of the Michigan Wolverines, if JJ's off the table, that you would say, oh, yeah, for Mike Macdonald, for John Schneider, for all new coaching staff, for Ryan Grubb, first-time NFL coordinator? Yep, these are a couple Wolverines that you have to have on your roster.
I sat with Mike Macdonald, the first time I ever sat with him, for over an hour on a Friday. On a Friday. It was wild. And we talked about philosophy, and we talked about the way that he wanted to build this defense and what Jim Harbaugh had in mind and what he was instructed to do as the coordinator for the Wolverines. And he talked about the philosophy, and in its simplest form, obviously there's a lot more to this, but in its simplest form, he talked about building a run wall with the interior of the defensive line, building very hard edges on the edge of the defensive line. So think of Aiden Hutchinson at that point. They were going to cater to a guy like Hutchinson. It just so happened that they have this David Ajabo that kind of comes on as well, and they've got these two hard edges for Mike Macdonald. And then he talked about having hybrid players in the middle of the field and lockdown corners. And when he talked about hybrid players, he talked about nickel and linebackers as guys that have to do everything really well, whether it's cover or stop the run. They just have to be great football players in the middle of the field because they've got to be able to stay on the field regardless of personnel, regardless of situation. You can't be shuttling in and out specialists on defense. Generally speaking, got to have a core group of guys out there that can play and match up with all sorts of different situations and personnel groups. And Mikey Sainristil is a guy that was a wide receiver, switched over to nickelback, and I thought he became, in the last 2 years, their best defender. I'm really high on him, loved him as a person, and because of that philosophy and needing those hybrid-style players, I think that Sainristil would be an interesting pick.
Do you think that is more collegial, where there is so much more up-tempo, where the field is a little bigger, where that middle of the field stretches, or do you think that plays into what he wants to do professionally too?
Well, I think it's still professionally because that what Jim wanted was what the Baltimore Ravens was doing. He came in and said, hey, John, I need your defense. Give me two guys that can run it because of all of these things. Mm-hmm. And I do think that you have more time because of the huddle to match up. But that being said, even when I watch the NFL game, if in college you're in nickel 85% of the time, and I think you would agree with that on defense, yeah. I think in the NFL it's still north of 65% of the time. Yeah. So that's more, the nickel back, if you will, has become more of a, quote, base defender than, the Will or Sam linebacker in a lot of cases. So, from my standpoint, I think that Sainristil holds a ton of value, even at the next level, and his ability to disrupt the game and impact the game, I think, is really strong. Well, here's a comparison, and I don't want to directly compare him to these players, but in the same vein of these guys that are creative impact players on the defensive side of the structure of their own defense, Sainristil had a mini version, JV version of kind of like an Ed Reed style impact because he could do everything on the field, and depending on the situation and the offensive formation and concept, his instincts would take over, and he was always around the ball. That's something that Jesse Minner and I talked a lot about this last year at Michigan, and I think that's something that Mike Macdonald would appreciate if he was in Seattle.
It will be interesting because they got a pretty good nickel. I mean, the best football player last year on the Seahawks defense was their first-round pick. And everything that you just said about Sainristil to me is Devin Witherspoon. And, but maybe Devin is that lockdown corner.
That's a good point.
I mean, maybe
I
Devin.
Even thought about that.
Well, but maybe they say, hold on a second.
I feel like a sulk because I wasn't really.
I wasn't going to say anything about that, Joel. But as you were talking, all I was thinking was,
go ahead.
You mean like Devin Witherspoon? Because I feel like I kind of got that. I mean, did you watch the Seahawks play last year?
Yeah, I did. I mean, not at length, certainly.
I'm sorry. You missed out.
I will tell you, there's some other players, too. You know who else would fit in that? And I would be interesting on your opinion on this, Brock, is Junior Colson,
Yep.
the linebacker. I think that he would be interesting.
I've heard his name a lot.
Yes.
A lot of people have kind of mentioned him as a potential. Is he gone by the time like the second round comes? Like where does I've seen people say first round, third round, second round. Where do you think he goes?
I don't think he's a first round player. I think that in the back end of the second round, I think he would probably be there. Maybe early in the third round, depending on, because remember, what we don't know is how quickly all those wide receivers are going to come off the board. That's a lot of slots that they're going to take up. So we'll see how that happens. And if that happens, what you're going to see is other position groups get shoved down the board and later into the draft.
Yeah. So at that draft, in a little bit over a month, you're going to be sitting up there with Daniel Jeremiah, great buddy of ours, great guy, Rich Eisen as well, and Rich was on the show last week. And I'm very curious now where you're falling. If QBs go 4 out of the first 5, Daniel Jeremiah's last mock had a certain southpaw from Montlake going right there, 12-13 to the Raiders. Are you feeling a Michael Penix is going to be drafted in the first round kind of vibe now?
Yeah, I do. I really do. The more I talk with people, and this is a guy that I've really loved, even back, before the season. He was, I think I categorized him as my dark horse Heisman even before the year in August. Here's what I love about Michael Penix. What I love about Michael Penix is that this guy is he's like a card counter in Vegas, in the sense that he is constant in a position to play with the odds in their favor, with his not just accuracy, but also pitch selection. The way that he puts pace and tempo or layers the football down the field, and then always seems to put the ball on the opposite side of the defender. So when I watch the film, I'm seeing Polk and McMillan and Adunze, and they're always adjusting and making great catches. I'm not saying especially Adunze. But they're always in a position where the defender can't quite get to the ball because of Penix's ability to throw the ball with leverage. And I even shudder at saying throw the ball. He passes the football. There are guys that are great throwers of the football, and it's beautiful. And they can be successful as quarterbacks. But Michael Penix is a great passer of the football. And when you pass the ball, you always throw away from the defense and with great leverage. I can't get Miami out of my mind. I just think he would fit so perfectly in Miami. They could get away from all of the RPO stuff that they have to do to fit Tua, and they could really leverage the defense down the field and play on top of the defense, which would open up their run game. It would open up the deep end cuts, which if you have speed like Tyreek Hill, that's the route that actually does business. Yes, it's great to go over the top and create big plays and explosives, but if you need a first down, if you need to get to the sticks, what you need is vertical stretch in the defense so that you can in-cut at the chains. That style of offense, I think, would actually work better for Miami than what they were doing this year with Tua. I can't get Miami out of my mind for Penix. I think he would be so perfect there.
Talking to Joel Klatt here on Brock and Salk. So if you were in the Seahawks' shoes and you've got Geno Smith back for at least one more year, and we'll see after that, you just traded for Sam Howell. How are you handling that? What do you make of Howell and his potential long-term to maybe unseat Geno?
At some point you got to close your eyes and picture the confetti falling and think to yourself, is that the type of guy that I could see, with a Lombardi trophy in his right hand? And unfortunately, I just don't see that with Sam Howell. That doesn't mean he can't be a good NFL starter, but, are we just trying to be wild cards here, or are we trying to go and actually win a Super Bowl? I know that that's a high bar and that seems critical, but Sam Howell is a fine NFL player. If he's your quarterback, I don't think you're trying to win the Super Bowl.
Do you feel that way with Geno?
Yes, exactly, verbatim.
Yeah, so kind of the same
Seahawks
thing.
are not a Super Bowl contender right now. They're just not. And because they don't have the requisite quarterback play to do that. They just don't. And it's one thing you could say, like, well, Joel Russell wasn't that when they won the Super Bowl. And to some extent, yes, that's true. But also think of how cheap Russell was and the roster that they had around him. Think of how dominant the Denver defense was in Super Bowl 50 and the roster they had around an aging Peyton Manning, okay? Seattle doesn't have that right now. They don't have the roster around an average quarterback to say to themselves, yeah, absolutely, we can go and compete with San Francisco. You're not even the best team in your own division right now. So at that, no, these quarterbacks are not the answer. They are placeholders. And until that is fixed or the roster is completely overhauled to be a roster that can compete with San Francisco toe-to-toe, then they're just playing out the string.